Okay, 1994 Sundancer 300, September of 2016. We bought this boat about a month, 2 months ago now. Doing some work on it, discovered the aft salon area had water. I'm going to back out here a little bit to give you an overall view. The aft salon area of the boat has a seating area, an extra set of bunks, low overhead. Underneath is the water tank for fresh water. And this compartment had a plywood cover, and this compartment was completely full of water. So much so that the plywood had gotten wet over a period of time, and the plywood lid was rotten. I came into the back corner and was crawling around, and it gave way. I could feel something give underneath. Removed all the seat cushions, saw the plywood, eventually got around to removing the plywood. The cleats were all rotted, the plywood was all rotted. I vacuumed out water that had been all the way up to the bottom of the plywood. Water had from time to time actually overflowed this compartment and had stained the carpeting. We've removed the bottom carpet. I've got other pictures of that. But you can see the staining, the dark staining, and you can see the dark color of the water. That's because this is from the plywood bulkheads that have rotted and decayed, and that turns the water dark brown, almost black. That's an indication of wood rot when it's dark brown water. So I removed the tank, vacuumed out more water, came back a couple of days later. This boat is not in the water currently, it's on the trailer. Came back a couple of days later and the water had returned. So I vacuumed that out again, waited a little more, and more water returned. So there's still water was coming from somewhere. Started probing the bulkheads, and I could see small traces coming through the bulkhead. Now, it may be a little hard to see here because I'm standing on my head. I'm looking down at the bottom of the boat. And this is not really the bottom of the hull. This is another layer of plywood decking that supports the water tank. And the actual keel is another 3 to 6 inches below this. Now, this corner here, this floor bulkhead comes into this floor section, comes into this bulkhead section. This is down, remember, this is up. It's a little difficult to see. I'll try to angle the camera. This roughness you see here and here is chopped fiberglass mat. That's the reinforcing for the polyester resin. The chopped fiber is where the strength comes from. The resin gives it the stiffness. Fiberglass otherwise would be a flexible cloth. The resin provides stiffness, fiberglass provides strength, thus fiberglass reinforced plastic. Now as I probed, the plywood behind here was obviously rotted. I started probing and digging it out. This void, this another compartment under here, a void, was completely full of water. I had chopped it down to get that to drain. I have been vacuuming that out. You can see there's more water has returned again as it slowly seeps out of some foam in there. That compartment is small. It's not a continuous compartment. Come up a little bit, try to come up slowly. There's a storage compartment under the bunk. That would be under the cushions. Inside that storage compartment, this is the bottom of the compartment. That void is under this. Now this again, this fiberglass, this is a little bit of chopped mat and epoxy over the top of that. Looks like a polyester or epoxy paint finished it off. Where they used the fiberglass, it was fairly strong. But they only brought the chopped mat up to here, about 8 to 10 inches off the bottom of the boat. From here up, we get less and less chopped mat till you get towards the top, and it gets almost smooth. In many places, it's just the grain of the wood showing through. Surfaces, you can see the same thing. These plywood surfaces, they coated with that same gray epoxy paint, but there's no reinforced plastic. So when you look very closely, you'll see hairline cracks have formed from expansion and contraction and flexing of the boat. for people climbing in and out of the compartment probably. So wherever there was no fiberglass reinforcing, there's hairline cracks. There were several of these cracks where this paint separates here, these two sections of paint. Here, there was no glass. So you have a crack right across here. This crack was in many places. You can see some other cracks. You can see some other hairline cracks. So wherever the mat stopped, and there was only resin, very little fiber, and then epoxy, it got hairline cracks. Well, the water level, as the water level in this rose, it got to those cracks and started soaking into the plywood. So that defect is how the water got into the plywood. Had this been fiberglass all the way up, the compartment would have gotten water in it, and that's still to be determined where exactly that water got in initially. We're still trying to track that down, whether that was either some freshwater fittings might have been leaking on the side of the tank. We're going to pressure test the tank. We have to get the tank figure out how we're going to get it out of the boat first. It's rather awkward shape. We're going to check. There was some signs of water coming in from the next compartment, which is where the freshwater pump and the sewer tank and the water heater are. It might have been coming in through here. We're going to check this thoroughly before reassembly. It easily could have been, as these go through chafe sleeves, so there's not real sealant. They're not very tightly sealed. They're just meant to protect the pipe from chafing. So if there was some water in that compartment, or if there was water from washdowns and such that got into that compartment, that's the lowest corner in that compartment. I'll show you shortly how that's almost a small little sump area as the hoses go down into this compartment. So it would have been very easy for water to enter that way. There's really no other way, unless the tank is leaking, unless these freshwater fittings themselves are leaking, that water would have gotten in here. Regardless of how the water somehow penetrated this compartment, had it been well sealed, the water simply would have overflowed eventually as the compartment filled, and people would have noticed the water here, and somebody should have. There's staining going on at this point, and they should have investigated where that water was coming from. It was coming from this compartment. They should have investigated that and resolved the problem. Because it stood so long, and because no one resolved it, and because of the cracking in the plywood, what could have been a small problem has now become a relatively large problem. So we're going to have to chop into all these different bulkheads and keep sounding them until we find solid wood and cutting them back. The rear bulkhead, which separates this compartment from the engine room, it's compromised as well. Did some probing here around wherever there were screw holes going through, holding the cleats on that supported the plywood lid, so to speak, under the cushions. Wherever that had a screw hole. Here's a screw hole. Here's a screw hole I have not probed yet. So here's a screw hole. Wherever there was a screw hole, the wood behind it is completely gone. Now this bulkhead has a little more fiber, a little higher up, but then the same thing occurs. You get the further up you go, the less chopped glass there is. And there's even places where they kind of missed a little bit because of a knot. So it's very, very hit or miss. Mostly this is where the screws were. Wherever there was a screw, the plywood is gone. At that point, I can now just go right through, right underneath the screw. Hopefully, that's going to be limited to small areas. We'll dig that out. If it's just limited to small areas, we'll dig it out. We'll cut a patch, fill it with a new piece of plywood, wet epoxy it in from the back, set it in there, wet epoxy behind it. As we set it in, clamp it in, and then once we're sure it's well clamped, we'll fill the best we can around that piece of plywood, and then we'll lay new glass over the top. I'm hoping that the engine room bulkhead is not seriously compromised. You get nice solid sound on most of the side frames, but that You can see, there's a really, you can see it's obviously gone across. Very dull sound. It's a little better, a little more like a delaminated sound, and not good and solid. And we do get into a pretty good sound towards the bottom. So I'm hoping maybe we don't have to cut down further than about this line, and hopefully not much above this line, because the water wouldn't have seeped up very much. It would have been just, it would wick up. It might hopefully it hasn't wicked up more than a couple of inches vertically above the penetrations. So that's the next couple projects we're going to be working on. I don't know if there's going to be any resolution. Boat's well out of warranty from Sea Ray, and really it was, you know, a combination of defects in how they prepare the surfaces to keep them well sealed, and water coming in that somebody didn't take care of in a timely manner. We'll have to see where that water came from. All right, thank you very much.